Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Smoking Tire Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Crown & Caliber. Listen, guys, buying watches is a lot like buying cars, except watches are a lot simpler than cars. It's easier to take care of them, and most people do take better care of them than they do their car. Where am I going with this? Guys, you should almost always be buying your luxury watches secondhand. They take depreciation hits like cars, but they work better, and typically a secondhand watch is in really great shape, or sometimes it's not and you save money. I'm talking about Crown & Caliber. My sponsor for the last 3 years is the place to buy a secondhand luxury watch online. Rolex, Omega, Patek, AP, Cartier, Breitling, did I say Omega? Definitely Omega, Lang, Jaeger, LeCoultre. There's whatever watch you want, chances are Crown & Caliber's got it. They have over 2,000 watches in stock, and if they don't have it, they can probably source one for you. If you've got a watch you're trying to get rid of or trade up, trade out, Crown & Caliber will accept your trade-ins. As a matter of fact, I'm in the middle of a trade right now. 2 watches for 1 watch. I'm trying to consolidate upwards because I've ended up with too many watches from Crown & Caliber. I have more than I can wear, and so I'm trying to consolidate into fewer, nicer watches. It's sort of the ebb and flow of the collector's collection, as you will. I've got a deal for you guys. If you go to Crown & Caliber, your first watch is going to get a little discount from me. Code TST175 at checkout. TST175 at checkout will get you $175 off your first watch at crowncaliber.com. Code TST175, folks. Use it, get yourself a watch, and then hit me up on social media. Send me a picture. Let me know what you bought. I like seeing when you guys buy watches. I'm always real happy for you when you get your first dope watch. I can relate to that experience. Let's talk for a second about the ThinkWare U1000 dash cam, folks. It can capture clear and crisp videos of your drive. The U1000 is the first 2-channel dash cam in the world to boast a native 4K front and 2K rear resolution cameras. In addition to its amazing video quality, the U1000 can save you money with its speed and red light camera alerts, or make you a safer driver with lane departure and front collision warnings. With the convenient remote live view and parking impact alert cloud features, you can instantly check on your car or be notified of potential hit and runs. The U1000 and ThinkWare's full range of dash cams are available online and in-store at thinkware.com, Best Buy, and Amazon in the US and Canada. And here's the coupon code, folks, SMOKE20. That's SMOKE, SMOKE 20, SMOKE 20 at thinkware.com. 20% off any regular price ThinkWare dash cam at checkout. Available on their website. Protect yourself with a ThinkWare dash cam. All right, folks, on this episode, we have a legend in studio, Stephan Papadakis. If you know about drag racing or if you know about drifting, you have certainly heard the name. Drag racing and drifting are 2 of the more opposite motorsports, in terms of cars anyway. Drag racing is all about the numbers. It's all going in a straight line. It's about solving that math problem, right? In drifting, it's kind of the opposite. Everything's a corner, and even a corner when it's not a corner. You got to make corners where they don't exist. And Stephan Papadakis has built championship-winning engines and chassis in both drag racing and in drifting, and some other sports as well. The dude is a legend, and we're lucky to have him in the show. Stephan Papadakis on the Smoking Tire Podcast.
All right, there it is. Hey, everybody, Smoking Tire Podcast. Welcome on this beautiful Monday evening. I hope you all had a good Thanksgiving weekend. I sat at home with my cats, which was really nice, and then we went to Benihana last night. There's a story there. It's not just Benihana. But we'll get to that later because Stephan Papadakis is in studio. Hello, sir.
What's up, man?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for racing up here in fucking seriously record time. I think you got here from Carson in 22 minutes or something.
Yeah, it was quick, Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks.
Nice to have you.
Yeah, it's you guys are super local, and I know we're in the same car scene down here.
Yeah.
We haven't spent that much time together, but I'm glad we could finally get together and hang out.
Yeah, I've only met you like twice, but I've heard your name like for years and years and years and years. I mean, going back to like OG Honda drag racing, because I was into Subarus back in the day. There was some crossover. So I want to talk about I actually want to do more instead of our usual just bullshit nothing show. I actually want to talk about like how you became you. So you're from New York?
Yeah, originally born in New York,
Yeah.
but I've lived in Southern California since I was four years old.
Oh,
so
okay.
I don't have much of the culture.
You should go back and visit. You could get some of that.
For
It's
sure.
fun.
Yeah, my mom's whole side is from up there, and I have a couple of aunts that still live in the city. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, I've got
You get your fee.
yeah.
Yeah, all right, cool. So what sparked the car thing for you? Where did it start?
Oh man, so not sure exactly because my dad, my mom are not so into cars, and no one in the family was into racing. Just from a really young age, I was playing with the normal thing, Hot Wheels and Legos, but I'd always build the cars out of Legos, and then I started getting into radio controlled cars, RC cars, really heavily.
Did you ever do slot cars too, or did you go straight to the RC cars?
Straight to the RC cars.
The slot cars were for real nerds like me. I did slot cars.
Yep, the nerds also drove on-road RC cars. I only did off-road in the dirt.
Oh yeah, the on-road ones. Whenever I go to Fontana, when you're going to the track, there's the RC car track that you drive by, and you see the guys pitched up with their tents, and they're up on that very tall thing, like the big bleachers. They're like controlling their. Those things look fast, actually. They're kind of crazy.
They're real fast.
They're real fast.
They got fast with electricity, right? Like nitromethane was really fast back in the day, but it was finicky. And now it's just probably screams because of motors being motors.
Yep. So now with the new lipo technology and the brushless motors, the electric are super powerful. But even back when I was racing the RC cars, the cars were very sophisticated. Suspension, adjustable, geometry.
It's like inboard shocks and stuff, right? Like cantilevered suspensions.
Yep. So, me being when I was 12, 13 years old, working on these RC cars and really going out and racing them, I was learning how to be a mechanic on a car, how to make sure stuff doesn't fall off, learning lines, learning how to deal with other racers, a lot of stuff that I think really helped me get into the real motorsport scene once I was old enough to drive.
Yeah. What was your first car?
First car was a 91 Honda Civic Si.
Oh, that's a good car. And what year was that?
That was a 93.
Okay, so you're what, 42, 43?
Yeah, 42.
Okay. Yeah, you're pretty okay. Great. So you're a little older than me. I just turned 38. So we're like same kind of era for cars, right? So did you lust after that 91 Civic Si, or did you fall into that Civic Si?
When I was 14 years old, I wanted a Mustang or a Camaro because that's what was the faster car. Looked kind of cool. That's what Vanilla Ice had with
Fox
the
bodies and IROCs, dude. I was a diehard Fox body, super Fox body. But I had a Honda homie too. He was always getting those weird parts from Japan.
Yep. Yeah. So that was the scene. And when I had some friends in the RC car scene around 15 years old, and they were into the Honda deals. They had Honda Civic, CRX, Prelude. Another couple of other guys had Volkswagens. And
do you think it was random that the RC people ended up in import cars and not in the muscle car scene, or do you think there's a coincidence?
There were some guys in the muscle car scenes for sure. This guy with an old Mustang and like an old Datsun truck with like a small block Chevy. So it was everything. But for some reason, I gravitated towards maybe the Honda stuff because the guys that were younger, I was 15, but the guys that were like 17, 18 had the Hondas, not the old muscle cars.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, you can modify these Hondas or these import cars or whatever, real cars, the same way you can modify the RC cars. I wasn't into the RC car stuff anymore. I totally transitioned into the real cars.
Yeah, kind of get the same sort of results. You change your suspensions and whatever, and you end up with similar kind of results in the real cars as you would in the RC cars, right?
Totally. And when I was 16 years old, I was not about to get a muscle car or a Camaro or a Mustang for my first car in my family, but a Honda Civic sure seemed like a reliable transportation. Little
like
did
sleeper
she know
for the parents.
Yeah, little did my mom know that people were modifying them, going out to the street races, doing this crazy stuff with those cars.
There was when the I'm a little younger than you, and when the WRX first came out, it's when a couple of those kids could sneak those in under their parents. Oh, it's Subaru. It's like all-wheel drive, mom, or like, and some of the more well-off kids, their parents didn't know what Audi S4s were. It's like, oh, that it's for like safety or something, right? Like they didn't understand that like you're almost guaranteed to smash a B5 S4 into a telephone pole if you start with
So I had a similar story, but I wasn't crashing the car. There was like broken axles, and the clutch was worn out, and then the transmission would start grinding because I'm speed shifting it.
Yeah.
So like all of a sudden it's not reliable anymore. I need to get all this repairs done on my
your
first
super
car.
reliable car that's always broken.
Yeah.
Wait, but were you into, because I mean in your like, you know, in your stats, a lot of your early like whoa shit moments were drag racing related. Did you intentionally go, I'm going to get a Honda and I'm going to go drag racing with it, or did that just sort of happen on its own?
No, it happened on its own organically through the scene that was here in Southern California. I was actually really into the road racing stuff. I was really into the off-road racing truck, like Mickey Thompson and such like that back then, because that's what I was racing with the RC cars.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the resources to go race at the racetrack and what they were doing on the street here was street racing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we'd go up to the canyons and go race around, in the canyons and such.
What was the 90s scene like in the canyons? Was it cool?
So in the 90s scene in the canyons was just my buddies and myself cruising around.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't racing per se and setting up like a street race. It was going out and just going fast through the canyons.
Because you heard about these fucking lunatics from like the 70s and 80s, right? Who would actually race like on Mulholland and stuff like that. I heard there's always these stories about this crazy Porsche 964 that was like 600 horsepower. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, we've done the story on like the Mulholland back in 50s and 60s was really big. And then even Calabasas area, like when Corbin was in high school, there was like people would go up and just time each other or race wheel to wheel, like up and down certain parts of Malibu, including like the legendary gentleman who was like in his 40s but ran a Miata with like 3 degrees of camber or something, something crazy like that.
I've heard another story about that, about some guy with a crazy air-cooled Porsche that, could run under 2 minutes up the Snake or whatever, whatever the time was. Yeah. Was it Malibu or Angeles Forest for you guys where you were driving around?
I was from Orange County, so it was more of the Orange County places. I think Carbon Canyon.
Yeah.
We'd go out to Ortega Highway. That was a little bit higher speed deal.
Ortega Highway is good. Glucker likes this road that's just off of Ortega Highway, that's sort of off the east end of it, that's supposedly very nice too and very quiet.
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun there, but the real scene was in the drag racing scene, because that's where the clubs would all go to hang out, and that's where when you made your car quicker, you could go, grudge match somebody, and that's where you would get props and you would get kind of known.
Yeah.
There was way more of a scene there.
And so you started racing this car, breaking it a lot, presumably, fixing it, doing it again. Eventually, you decided probably, right, I need a full race car and not to drive this thing around or something to that effect.
So pretty soon after I got my license, they opened up Terminal Island Raceway in Long Beach, California, and it was some old street racer guys, Big Willie and his whole crew, and they wanted to get the street races and bring them to the real track. And they did a good job of, finally opening up a quarter mile here locally. It was $10 to get in a race. The tech inspection was very lenient. And we would go there, and now I could get actual times. Like my car ran 14-second quarter mile or whatever, and I'd make changes to it or change my driving, and I could see how that was it improve or whatever. And then that's when I really started getting into the racetrack racing.
Road courses?
No, the racetrack on the quarter mile. Quarter mile. Yeah, it was all just quarter mile stuff at that time. There was no
was
road racing
Terminal
for me.
Island just kind of like a chill spot to test, as opposed to like going out to Fontana or like a real track, or was it a real drag strip?
So it was a real drag strip to where it had a quarter mile.
Is that it right there? Zach, I think Zach's got a nice old picture of it.
Yeah,
Lost
it's a real drag strip.
Drag,
it had a Christmas tree, the whole deal, timers and everything. They had 7-second cars out there sometimes, and it was the real deal. They didn't run NHRA events.
Yeah,
but so this is the deal. In the scene in the 90s, if you were into the import or sport compact scene in Southern California, they had the Battle of the Imports that had about 2 or 3 events per year, and you always had to go to those because those were those were seen. Those are great. They do Pomona sometimes, a couple times a year, maybe once, which was the street legal drags.
Right.
And that was about it. Aside from that, you could go to the street races, which I pretty quickly realized that I'm getting too many tickets and there's no future here. And then you had Terminal Island. Soon after that, in around 98, 99, they had a few nationwide events. So NYRA, and IDRC,
hot import nights kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So they're mixing the drag racing with the culture side and putting a festival event together.
Yeah. That was a really interesting time, like right before the Fast and the Furious came out, like those last 2 years right before it came out, when Phantom lights were actually kind of okay. So when was the big breakthrough of? Because wait, you were the first front wheel drive car in the 9s, 8s, and 7s? Is that right?
Yeah, that's
I read
right.
all this morning, right? For
no,
9s,
7s. We never actually ran 7s with the front wheel drive.
Oh, okay.
But we ran. With all the Battle of the Imports and all these different drag racing events we were going to, I always wanted to have a faster car. Eventually, by 18 years old, around 96, my street car became a race car. I'm carpooling with my girlfriend. The place that I worked at once I graduated from high school built race engines, and I just wanted to make my car faster, so I went and worked for a place that built race engines. Around the same time, I met a guy named Sean Carlson. He was a great fabricator. He was one of the editors for Turbo Magazine back in the days. And out of his parents' garage, he would build roll cages and stuff. And I was really good at building the engines, but not very good at the chassis. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Look, let's build a car. I'll build the car, you build the engine, and then we'll make something really quick in the quarter mile." Well, we built a front-wheel drive 1998 Honda Civic that was able to was the first into the 9-second quarter mile.
That's the one at the Peterson right now, right?
Yep, that's that car.
Yeah, it's the yellow and black.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a bitchin' looking car. Yeah, it's on display at the Peterson Museum right now. You can go see it. There it is.
So at that time,
very nice.
Yeah. So at that time in the import scene, there were a lot of car racers that were trying to build tube chassis front wheel drive or rear wheel drive, but didn't really have the resources to know how to really kind of get it finished. But Sean and I were able to build this tube chassis, 4-cylinder front wheel drive turbocharged car, and we were able to go 9-second in the quarter mile. And then the year after that, we built the 2001 Civic Coupe,
which is this one here that looks like the SI.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's that one was a very unique drivetrain configuration. So up until this point, the drag racing cars were very transverse mounted engines.
Yeah.
So kind of the engine's mounted left to right with the transmission next to it, and the axles come out to
like the
front wheels,
cars.
like the street cars.
Yeah.
On the second generation front wheel drive tube chassis drag race car, came up with an idea of turning the engine 90 degrees, so longitudinal,
yeah,
and using a transaxle like what maybe would be in a Porsche or like a dune buggy, but putting that in the front, and then what that allowed.
Did you use like a Porsche Type 915 type gearbox, or is it like some crazy sequential thing?
It was a crazy sequential thing. A company called Fortin makes it. They do Baja type transaxles, for off-road vehicles. And
look at that. That looks, wow. That doesn't look right at all.
So by turning the engine 90 degrees, it hung out farther. The engine hung out farther off the nose and helped with more weight on the front tires to get more grip. It also narrowed the whole package, and we're able to run longer, better designed suspension arms to have a better suspension on the car as well.
Oh, how interesting. Yeah, because like when you have a transverse engine, you have all kinds of problems, from turning radius to the side width of the front wheels you can use to the length of your control arms. And so you just free up like a crazy amount of space. Wait, so in this photo, it's a little cut off. The gearbox is mounted behind the engine or in front of the engine there? Behind, right?
It's the same as they have like in the Audis.
Okay,
or even a Subaru.
Right, right.
There's an engine, and then the engine bolts to the transmission. The rear end, or like call it the differential, is called behind the clutch, and then the transmission is behind the axle.
Oh, okay, cool.
Wow.
Okay, wow.
Weird. Very weird.
Yep.
Crazy.
So I actually got that idea walking around SEMA, year probably 1999, and I always like to look around and never know we were going to be inspired. And I was looking under the hood of an Audi Quattro, an old Audi Quattro, and I was like, oh my God, that configuration would work so well for front-wheel drive drag racing. And then started doing some research on different transaxles that we could use, and eventually, I found the guys in San Diego. Fortin.
Did you ever consider going for the full all-wheel drive?
There's considerations, but the classes that we were racing were front-wheel drive
classes, yeah.
and like this modified class where we would race the back half to rear-wheel drive cars.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious because they'd have way more grip and launch super hard, and then like the last 300 feet of the quarter mile we'd come screaming by them at like 30 miles an hour faster.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
What compelled you to go so far in front wheel drive in what is theoretically a class that it should be much harder to do that? Was it just the challenge of it, or do you just love Hondas that much? Or
it was the challenge.
Yeah.
It was, look, you have to remember that I grew up not in a motorsports family. I didn't have the resources, and the crew that I was, like my friends and like the culture that I was in, it was a bit of an underdog deal. Like we were the front wheel drive drag racers, not the rear wheel drive, and we had these 4-cylinder engines, not the big V8s. And then so we were kind of like the underdogs, but those were typically the less expensive cars kind of to build, or those are the cars that we happen to have. And we're blazing our own trail in motorsports doing this front wheel drive drag racing. And that was our scene, racing these sport compacts.
Yeah.
And the guys with their V8s and the guys with their Mustangs they were doing something different. And we were having fun blazing a trail.
Yeah. So you don't get to what's 9 seconds in a 4-cylinder front wheel drive with 900 horsepower, something like that?
Yeah, back then, no, it was only about 650. The cars were so light.
Oh.
So this car weighed 1,650 pounds with
light.
me in it.
That's fucking light.
Whoa.
So
Yeah,
everything
really
was about, if you have weight, make sure it's in front of the front axle, and then everything behind that is just going to slow you down. So it was
what an interesting science. That's so crazy. Yeah. So so you built that car with your buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you build it as a business enterprise? At what point because that's a serious car. I mean, it's it's a kind of car a hobbyist, I suppose, could build, but that's the start of a business, right?
When you're 19 years old, you don't think that far ahead, or 20 years old. So it was a passion project. I was a few years out of high school and realized that I wanted to go into the motorsport scene. And there were, and maybe kind of still really aren't here in the U.S., very good schooling paths if you're interested in motorsport. I mean, I always recommend like mechanical engineering or something like that. But I didn't have much guidance.
Do you think any of those trade type programs where you're learning, the hands-on engine repair, any of those are those? The reason I ask is because I think I'm going to start working with this charity where we're going to do these sort of curated giveaway experiences that are going to be like really like where you win like really expensive cars. It's going to be awesome, but as it's going to be to support this foundation that sets up scholarships for people to go to a variety of like the 10 best mechanic schools like in the country.
I think that's a valid cause, and I think if you want to work in the repair business or for a dealership or something like that I have friends that make over $100,000 working on Hondas,
regular cars,
and Toyotas, and just regular cars.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely a good job. I wanted to work in motorsports. I wanted to build racing engines. I wanted to do that stuff. So I took my college money and built a race car. And the theory was that I'm going to learn more from this project and from the whole building process. So building a car is not just physically working on it. It's sourcing parts. It's working with vendors. It's working with subcontractors.
Sponsors.
Potentially sponsors in the future. So this was starting a business, which is a car. But honestly, it was mostly a passion project. With some hope that it could turn into some sort of business, but it was all hopes and dreams. And so we wanted to run 9-second quarter mile, and we wanted to do it without any stickers on the car, any like product support, because the idea was hopefully we could turn this into some sort of business. But unless we did it on our own and then hopefully got some like monetary sponsors. Then if we just put a bunch of stickers on the car, that wouldn't help us as a business because you can't run the program on just free parts.
Right.
So, so once we got the car finished and went out there and ran 9s, and at the time, okay, let me set the stage for you guys a little bit.
How long did it take you to run 9s? How many tries?
I think the second time to the track, first or second time to the track. Yeah. So look, we had already run in the mid-10s.
Okay.
So we had already known a kind of an idea of the formula. We need this much power. We need this tire at this weight. We can get into
so
the 9 second
you got pretty
quarter
close out of the box, and then you fine-tune your way there within a couple of race weekends.
Within the first race weekend.
Oh,
so
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so let me set the stage. So in 1999, there was a lot of... In 1999, there was a big front-wheel drive scene. You had the Super Street magazine, a Turbo magazine, and I think maybe Import Tuner. There's a whole subculture of... And there were street racers all over the U.S., and there was just tons of... There was a big scene going on.
Such a big scene that old white guys wrote a movie about it.
Yep.
They made $1 billion.
Billions. And where people would get this information from would be like the magazines. And like Super Street, it would be the fastest front-wheel drive car and rear-wheel drive and all these. And everybody wanted these titles. But there was one title that seemed like this crazy, like, barrier was the 9-second front-wheel drive quarter mile. No one had done that globally, and we wanted to be the first ones to do it. And we built this car about 6 months or so, brought it out to a test day when no one around, and actually ran a 9-second quarter mile and said, we can't tell anybody we actually went that quick.
No one will believe us.
No, we wanted to do it in front of people.
In front of people, yeah.
So, and remember, this is before Instagram and much of the web as we know it. And
call a reporter, issue a press release.
The first runs were filmed on a VHS, like over the shoulder.
Hell yeah.
Deal. So we went out there and said, we tested the car, but we don't want to. We didn't run that quick. And so in front of everybody, this big Battle of the Imports, we were able to run 9s, and it was this whole scene. And because all of the media and everybody was at this Battle of the Imports event at Palmdale, California, it really catapulted the team and I guess myself to the top level within the sport compact drag racing scene.
So did you instantly have a job? Or did you instantly have sponsors?
No, it took a little bit of a while to kind of ramp that up. I had a buddy, Frank Choi, who ran the Battle of the Imports events, and he helped and held my hand and said, look, this is what a proposal is, and this is what you need to get some return on investment for them, and you should put on paper maybe the events you're going to do. And sort of, he helped me get some of my first sponsors, and because he was already working with sponsors with the events. Right?
So it's easy to package it and bundle it, or at least, here's Stefan, you should meet this guy.
And it was a partnership where he had these events and he wanted to get outside of Los Angeles area and do events in the East Coast and Texas and Virginia. And then I was going to be his headline show. So people were finding out about this Battle of the Imports that was going to take place in at their local racetrack, and the front-wheel drive 9-second car from Stephan Papadakis will be there. And that was a bit of the attraction. So it was mutually beneficial for us to work together.
That's awesome.
You were like Bigfoot for front wheel drive cars for a little bit. Like, Bigfoot will be here, come out to the Truck Expo thing. But
absolutely,
you were a huge name. Wow.
Yeah, it was a thing because people had these cars and wanted to, and that whole scene was picking up, and everybody was dying for more information, and the magazines and these events is where you would get that.
When was the last time that car ran, you think?
2000 or 2001.
Been a while.
Yeah, it was a scary beast. We had designed the front suspension.
What's it like to go 9 or 8 seconds in a front wheel drive car? Is it? There's
a lot going on. So in that car, it was very analog. So there was an engine control system that was electronic, but that only controlled the engine. It didn't help with the launching or anything like that.
So you mentioned the name of gearbox, but was it like what type of gearbox was it?
Well, so the first car, the one the Peterson, that Honda Civic had a Honda Prelude engine and transmission, heavily modified. But it still used a clutch to shift.
So regular manual gearbox.
Yep.
Okay,
that's right.
It was a 9s with a regular manual gearbox.
We did. Yeah.
How many shifts?
I would go into, I think it was into 5th. So 4 shifts. So this is the deal. You'd pull up and you'd stage with like the handbrake and get the in first gear, stage, get into the beams. You'd launch by holding your throttle pedal at the RPM that you desired. We did not have a 2-step rev limiter.
You're manually launching that?
Yeah, manually launching it. And then riding the clutch out to where you get the right amount of clutch slip, and then the right amount of tire slip as well. And then once I shifted into second, I'd hit a button on the steering wheel that went from low boost to high boost, and then onto third and fourth And that was it. Top of fourth. That was a full quarter mile. So yeah, manually launch it.
That's a lot to do.
Yeah, it was really busy.
Yeah. I'd love to see some in-car of what your right hand is doing. Would it go straight? Did it? Because with that, you turn the engine, you use a whole different setup. So if you were running a 600 horsepower fucking transverse, that thing would want to turn right into the wall or something. But with the way you did it want to go straight?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. No, it wasn't bad because the car ran a spool, so there wasn't any differential. And as long as you measured the tires, so this is really important with actually all drag racing when they run a spool, is you actually measure the circumference of the tire, and you want the left and the right side tire to be within about a quarter inch or so. Because imagine you've got this spool, and both tires are turning the same, or front tires are turning the same speed, but one's a slightly larger, it's always going to want to turn.
Yeah. So you have to measure every individual tire you put on the car?
Yep, and then you run matched sets. So professional drag racing teams, they'll have several tires. They'll mount them up. They'll put them up to a pressure, and then they'll measure them, and they'll put them in matched sets.
Yeah. Drag racing is a crazy science. It's such a launch in a fast car is just such like a violent transfer of energy. Especially when you start going. The real, the 4 seconds, 5 seconds, stuff like that. It's like...
Well, I'm reading this book on chassis setup, to try to understand how something works a little bit. And they were talking about how in the beginning of drag racing, they thought that the pressure a tire could put down on the tarmac was only that of 1G, because it's that's Newton's law of gravity. It's pressing down with the weight of the car. And then drag racing went and shattered that idea because it was actually pressing into the ground harder than the car's weight. And physicists were like, what, how is that even possible? It's just there's so much science in the tire and how it wrinkles and how that accelerates the car forward versus, the rest of it. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot to be learned by the drag racing technology, and I learned a lot because you can get this is the thing, it's a quarter mile every run, and you can really fine tune your setup, whether suspension or the engine or whatever. It's a really good training ground to make small changes and to see the benefit or the loss and really learn from that procedure.
Yeah.
Versus maybe road racing or off-road, there's so many variables every time you go on a lap, or the driver can have a lot more to do with it as well. The drag racing, it's so much the mechanics and the vehicle.
Especially, and I think that is more true now, especially when you just described the process of what 9 seconds was like in that car. There's a lot of room for driver error or driver variation, whereas if you've got two hands on the wheel, holding your 2-speed, or you're just letting your launch control go, and you're really delivering, the car is delivering the same result every time, I think it gets a lot easier, right?
Yeah, totally. And that was a transition that I kind of went through where magazines and stuff would bring me out to drag race their street cars. They said, okay, we're going to bring Stefan out. He's going to run this. It could be the new Mustang or front-wheel drive car or whatever, because I was really good at manually launching these cars. But as the cars got better than the drivers with launch control and traction control and stuff, I couldn't beat the electronics anymore. Yeah. And so now you could just have the editors get the best quarter miles out of the cars.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter anymore with a car with launch control. I mean, you can pretty much have anybody do it. Have you? I saw you drove up today in a Tesla. Is that the fast one? Is it 100?
No. It's
not
just
the super fast one?
No.
Have you driven the Taycan yet? The Porsche?
No.
It's a fucking dragster.
I like
Porsche says 10.5 in the quarter. They say, which really means probably 9.
Yeah,
it's crazy, dude.
The electric cars. I came from electric RC car racing a long time ago, but I believe in the performance of the electric car. I don't believe in the endurance of an electric car.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that it falls short. But
for as far as drag racing,
as far as driving around Southern California, I think it does quite well in the traffic and stop and goes. And for me, if I want to speed around a little bit and not call a bunch of attention to myself, then a quiet car is better than a modified exhaust.
It is the right tool for the job of driving around LA. If you want to be a complete dick in a car, an electric car is the way to do it. Because it's really inoffensive. You can be a dick and other people don't get mad because it's not like, when you go by.
That's true.
Especially if you're used to Hondas.
Dude,
people have really viscerally offended by someone driving a Honda very fast. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a Fast and the Furious thing or whatever. That word, like racer, it comes to mind. It's like when you see some, like not everybody, but I feel like when people see Hondas being driven really fast, they get like a, you know.
Probably assume as a 16-year-old maybe, because like for a while it was it still is a very affordable kind of tuner car.
I think I know what it is. It's that, look, you watch motorcycle guys speed around, and you're like, he's going to hurt himself. And then you watch like the racer guy race around, and you're like, he's going to hurt somebody.
Yeah, that's very good. Yes.
So
a fast Honda like is such a nice thing.
Yeah.
Like a really well set up Honda with like a nice revvy motor and like not too stiff suspension is like so fun.
So that's, and that's the thing with a lot of the import cars that I think people appreciate now, right? So it could be an old, AE86, like 86 Toyota Corolla.
They're the best.
Or some of the guys with the Mazdas with the rotaries, and obviously the old classic Porsches, and even
you
the
know what
modern
gets
Porsches.
no love? The MX-3 with that crazy V6 from Japan, that like 2-liter V6 that revs to a zillion RPM. That motor rules. No one ever talks about it
because the car's ugly.
I know.
Yeah.
Ugly loses every time. Doesn't matter how cool your motor is.
Dude, so I want to get back to, you were talking about the schooling for the kids.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that if someone wants to get into motorsport, at least I would rather hire somebody that had experience on their own cars, or maybe with their friends' cars, and said, came to me and said, look, I've built this car from the ground up. I've blown it up. I've rebuilt it. We've gone to the track. We've learned how to drag race it a bit, and he knows how to work with his buddies. And I feel like there's a huge experience that really can help at the motorsports level, more than necessarily going to a technical school and learning how to use a ratchet from the textbook or some of the stuff they may teach you at the school. Although I think you make the argument that an individual that will go through a couple years of school and show up on time and get good grades is also a skill.
Probably a good employee.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good point. I mean, if for a lot of people out there who might go, how do I become Stefan? The answer is probably in your own garage. At least step 1, if not step 50.
Yeah, and that's what I want to talk about that a little bit here, because that's one of the questions I get asked the most is, how do I do what you do, or how do I get into motorsports? Because there isn't, here in the U.S., there doesn't seem to be much of a stepping stone or much of a...
There's not a career day for the race teams. They don't really do that so much.
Yeah.
They should, maybe. Maybe there should be a motorsports career day, and someone should put something like that on who has some pull.
Well, the challenge, I think, is kids that I meet don't want to be on a NASCAR team and travel around doing NASCAR, and don't necessarily want to change heads on a top fuel dragster. They like the sport compact scene, or they like the import cars, or they like the drifting scene. They want to work in those. What makes it hard, though, is there's less paying jobs within that scene. There's there's few of them.
They're smaller series. It's tough. So it's good that you brought up drift, because in addition to these very famous front wheel drive drag cars, you've also been responsible for some very successful drift cars. The V8 NASCAR Scion that Tanner drove, which is one of my favorite drift cars of all time. Frederick Aasbo's. This is a rear drive converted Corolla. Yeah, it's a Corolla. I think it's a Corolla, right?
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the other? There's a couple more on the list. What else is on the list there of your Formula Drift greatest hits?
So we took a 2009 Scion TC, converted it to rear-wheel drive.
Yes.
We were working with Scion at the time, and we got a hold of the guys over at TRD that did the NASCAR engines. When they had the V8 engine, they were able to flow us one of those, and we put that in the front and ended up with a 650 horsepower rear-wheel drive converted Scion TC.
It's a pretty nasty car.
We built all of the suspension for drift specific and went out there, and it was a top-level competitor.
What did you decide, I'm going to start building drift cars right now, or did a team come to you and say, we have an idea, or what was it that sparked the interest in drift cars at all?
Around the age of 20,
sort of the opposite of drag cars.
Yeah, around 2007, or sorry, around 2004, 2005, I started getting a bit burnt out of drag racing. So many years of it, and traveling around the U.S., and every time I'd go to another track, it'd be another quarter-mile straight piece of asphalt, which at just some point I just wanted to do something different, and I had these dreams that I'm a good drag racer. I could go road racing, and maybe I should get a shifter card, and maybe I can be an IndyCar driver and these other things. And once I started going towards the road racing route, I realized, these guys have been doing this since they were 6. And they're better than me.
How much of it was being driven by your desire to be a driver and then have something awesome to drive versus I want to be the guy who builds the engine that someone else gets in the car and drives?
From day one, it was I want to be the driver, but I don't have money to get a race car, so I need to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of driver stories. But some are able to be a good enough driver to sort of end up having somebody work on their car. But for me, I ended up being a better mechanic and car builder than a driver. But as I was doing both in the drifting scene, as I got a bit burnt out of the drag racing and kind of got to the top level. Eventually, so in 2003 to 2005, we were racing a full tube chassis, rear wheel drive, Acura NSX, the V6, twin turboed, 1600 horsepower car.
Whoa.
So
drag car?
That drag car. Eventually ran 6.52 in the quarter mile at 215 miles an hour. So it was always this elevation.
Still exist, that car? Where's that car now?
It was sold. It's around somewhere. Wow. Yeah. But
did you turn the engine longitudinal in that car too, or did you leave it transverse in that car?
It was longitudinal.
Okay,
so north south.
Yeah,
but very traditional. So the chassis was a NHRA Pro Stock chassis. It used an NHRA drag racing specific transmission. It had 17-inch wide tires in the rear.
Was the engine in the front or the back?
Engine in the front. So it used the engine from an Acura NSX, but it wasn't utilized in the same ways that it was in it. Yeah.
They unmid engine did.
We did.
So weird.
So that was always the thing, was we built really crazy, unique cars. But made sure that they were always competitive at the same time.
Yeah.
And that was the challenge, right? It wasn't about, and it still isn't about, building something exotic. It's about building something challenging that's also competitive.
Yeah.
It's because you can go to a catalog and you can order stuff all day long, but I don't think that's very fun. I like to build stuff from the ground up. So once we started working,
Scion was a tube chassis car as well, or was there anything that was actually Scion about that?
A lot of it was Scion. The way the rules in Formula Drift are, you have to use the factory unibody, you have to use the factory front and rear cross members. You can only modify certain areas of it. So we were able to turn the engine 90 degrees. We modified and made room for the bell housing and the transmission tunnel through the center of the car. And of course the drivetrain and wiring and cooling system and all that stuff. But it was all built. It's imagine building a sailboat in a bottle.
Yeah.
But we're building a race car in a unibody chassis. Yeah.
Well, last week I went to the Hyundai Proving Grounds and I drove their RM19. Have you seen this? Get a picture of it, Zach. It's basically, is it on my Instagram from today? Yes, it is. It's basically like a Veloster DTM car, but it's mid-engine rear-wheel drive. They moved the entire front subframe with the engine and everything to the rear.
Does it race in some sort of series, or what's the purpose of it?
They are not saying, but they're kind of winking that they're going to build a mid-engine car, and this is sort of the dev car for it. So it's got an X-Track gearbox in it, and it's got the TCR powertrain, so it's 380 horsepower, 400 pounds of torque. Goes like a motherfucker. I mean, it's quite fast, and it handles pretty good too. And it was really fun, and I got to drive it last week, and it was shockingly complete. It was a real car. Things, air conditioning, shit worked.
So that's a really cool build.
It was amazing.
I really like that stuff, and whoever built that definitely had a huge knowledge level of every aspect of a car in order to get the drivetrain and the suspension and the body and the electrical and, like you said, maybe the air conditioning and stuff to work. So that's
in the back.
Yeah.
Well,
that's impressive.
Factory money. I got a video up right now. I got my video review, and I wrote about it for Road and Track, so you can go see those things if you care. But with a drift car, when you go, okay, we're going to build a rear-wheel drive Scion here, and we're going to use a NASCAR engine, and we're going to make it work, and it'll be within the rules. Are you taking a real kind of smoky eunuch kind of attitude towards the rule book? Are you like a rules are meant to be broken sort of guy, or meant to be bent, if it were?
The car was totally built in the gray section of the rules. Yeah, and especially with Formula Drift, especially at that time, very thin rule book. But that, yes. The answer is yes.
No, like it's more a question of like, do you enjoy finding the area between the notes? You know what I mean, in the rule book.
I want to make a car as competitive as possible.
Yeah.
And sometimes to make a car more competitive, you have to push the edges of the rule book. And as long as you can skillfully debate some argument why what you're doing should be legal, then typically it does get through, at least for the first year. But we've had several rule book changes in the series that we've raced in that the rules were changed to close loopholes that we had taken advantage of.
When that happens? The next year when they go, oh, they figured that out. Shit.
Yeah, it's a bit of a compliment, but the argument for what we do is, look, we're starting with a front-wheel drive vehicle and converting it to rear-wheel drive and competing against, at that time, even now, Dodge Vipers, Chevrolet Corvettes,
and matter of fact, you're
Mustangs.
still competing against that same Dodge Viper.
Yeah.
that poor old Hubinette Viper is still kicking around.
So that's the challenge that we've had with having obscure cars.
Yeah.
Obscure in the scene that we're in. Not, these are obviously very popular cars.
But
though. Yeah, and that's the thing is, these cars are ubiquitous on the road, but they're obscure in the series that we're competing in. So it takes a lot of innovation to make them competitive with very traditional racing car based cars that we're racing against. So that's why we have to push the rule book to the edge. And that's the enjoyable part, and I guess it goes all the way back to my front wheel drive drag racing, is trying to make something competitive that just shouldn't be. And that's the challenge. That's the thing that I love. If it was just ordering up a car and then getting the best driver and then kind of putting together what you think is going to go win and then go win,
well,
that's
Formula
not that
D
exciting
is
to me.
A really interesting series because Tanner in that Scion, I mean, I think it was great when he won the championship in that car, didn't he?
No, he won the championship a couple times in a 350Z before that.
The Z. Oh,
yeah,
did he come second? I think he was top three.
It was top
in the
three
series.
for sure.
I mean, he was very successful in that car.
Yep.
Even if he didn't win the championship, but that's got to be incredibly rewarding when you see a car that is not even rear wheel drive and you've made it and a good driver is able to make it be successful. But also I think Formula Drift kind of rewards the creativity. You've got that Italian dude who's running the Ferrari 599 now. Some guy was running a Porsche 993 a few years ago, a complete lunatic. There's people who enter really bizarre cars into that. And I think it's because they want to be the guy driving the weird car. They don't want to be just another dude in 240.
It's a bit of the underdog motorsport.
Yeah.
We're not racing with a stopwatch, and arguably we're not racing traditional racing cars, and we're turning right when we're going around the left-hand corner.
Yeah.
So there's and a lot of us didn't grow up in the traditional motorsport family or aspiring to be a traditional race car driver working in a traditional scene. Maybe because we didn't like it that much and felt the box was too defined. And the drifting, because you see the variety of cars and the variety of tracks and the evolution that it's going through quickly, it's gotten a big following, and I'm a fan as well as someone obviously competes in it. But as we see this new generation of automotive enthusiasts come up, typically drift is on their radar.
Well, it's the most fun I think you can do in a car. Have you done any drifting yourself?
For sure. I competed for a few years.
Oh, you did as a driver?
Yeah.
Driving what?
At first, I had a Honda S2000.
Oh, cool.
Actually, I had a Nissan 240 first for a year or so, and then to a Honda S2000.
So eventually, funny. I only think of you as a builder. I don't think of you as a driver. What years were you competing?
2004, I did a couple of events. 2005 to 2007, I raced the whole series.
How did you do as a driver?
Poor. The drifting, I mean, I can get around the track.
Yeah.
But
is this you? Your black and yellow S2000?
Yeah.
Can't show it.
Yeah, driver Stephan Papadakis.
Yeah, so I can drive the cars.
Yeah, you can.
I've road raced. I've run in Honda Challenge for years with NASA.
Oh, fun.
I had an off-road truck that I did pro light with the Lucas Off-Road Series.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. I've done a bunch of different racing, and that's definitely still
Well, you
it was
do you
definitely
take some owner liberties when you build the car, and you go, listen, I got to make sure this thing works. I'm going to need to do a little seat time.
So this is the deal: is because you can't go to school to learn this stuff, you have to learn hands-on. So I said, okay, I want to get into drifting. I think this looks really fun. I'm going to build a car.
Yeah.
I'm going to drive it. I'm going to learn the language. I'm going to learn the guys. I'm going to learn the vocabulary. I'm going to figure all this stuff out. And then that way, when we started the team and brought on Tanner Foust to drive the A car and I was in the B car, we already had a lot of experience on what I thought it took to win. I just needed a driver that could drive the car to win.
Yeah,
and then you also spoke a good amount of the language because you had done the driving and built the car. And so if he gave you feedback on what the car was doing or not doing and stuff, you understood a better amount than if someone had come in just from like a different racing series without having competed. And they go, even if they're an engineer, it helps that you speak that language together.
Absolutely. And those are skills that I can still use.
Yeah.
What was the timeline between when you decided to get into this sport? Did you go into it with kind of a simple car first, just for fun, and then you started learning and then progressing to the other cars and going, okay, like you're basically sending yourself to a university to prepare yourself to run a team to build cars for competitors? Like, how long was that trajectory?
Yep. So I was running the drag racing program in 2004 and 2005 in parallel with the drift stuff. So we were running the full drag racing program, and on the side, I built a 240 SX in 2004, did a couple of events. First car, basically just super basic. In 2005, built the Honda S2000. That was kind of going with everything we learned from the second car. From the first car and applying it to the second car. And then at the end of 2005, retired from drag racing, and then went full on drift in 2006. Wow. And then for the same budget that we were spending on the drag program, we were able to do a 2-car drift program in form of the drift.
Really?
And I said, I think I can build a car that can win, but I don't think I can drive to win. Yeah. And we need to win. And Tanner Foust, at the time, a very unknown driver, doing a little bit of rally stuff and doing some drifting in 2004, 2005, wanted to have a more competitive car that he could drive. So the synergies there lined up, and Tanner drove the car that we built, and the rest is history. Within 3 years, we won 2 championships.
Yeah.
And,
wow!
And so what basically the formula was. It's kind of like ready, fire, aim. Yeah. Let me get in there, let me build something, let me try to have some fun, but learn a lot. And then once we kind of figured it out, it's like, let's do this and let's go full on.
Yeah, okay. So have fun while you're learning, and then focus for real once you know what you need to do.
Yeah, and it has to be kind of low stakes.
Yeah.
Right. So when I first got into the drift, it didn't really have sponsors on it so much, and I wasn't pushing it that hard because maybe I didn't look that good out there.
Yeah.
But then actually people cared. They're like, oh, you're getting into drift. Let me check it out. Or they want to know about the car. And it wasn't really that much always about. And this is what I learned, which is really important. I think leading all the way up to today was, I think a lot of enthusiasts are not always just interested in the person that won or the most competitive team. If you've got an interesting story, or if they can check out the car that's sort of interesting, or maybe the way that you're building it, or if that story is interesting, I think people are attracted to that, not just people that win.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, especially if in the last 5 years when you have so much control of your own narrative, and you can be an interesting person. Like I think of like Corey Hosford, who was a great driver and has won did some winning at one level, but he became kind of a personality. He wasn't able to win at the top level for financial reasons or whatever the reasons was. We should get Corey back on. I don't know, but like he was able to turn his social media into a fun, irreverent thing that would carry him in between kind of slow times as a driver.
Yeah, and I've been inspired by guys like Corey and other people within the scene that were able to create a career not based on
winning.
No, but
not based solely on purse money.
And this is the deal. Is I for drag racing for years, there was a couple of teams, especially one team that they were really good. They would beat us sometimes, and they were the hardest working people at the track and terrible at marketing. And not that friendly when people would come up to the pits and such. And they would find themselves without a sponsor and without money to continue to go racing, even though on paper they were the most competitive, and you could argue that they would be be the most more successful team than ours, but they weren't succeeding on the marketing end of it.
Well, and people also, if someone supports a race team, I think if I was going to support a race team, I'd want to support a race team where I could go to the race and like hanging out with the team would be fun. You know what I mean? Like the people would be fun, the car would be accessible, the driver would be cool, the food would be nice, like whatever it is, that experience. And if you're a sucky team or a sucky team owner and you don't make your sponsors feel like they're there to have a good time with you, it probably isn't going to work out.
It's the same thing with the guys that you work with a lot of the guys that we work with come out for the race weekends and don't necessarily work at our shop during the week or during the off season. They have normal 9-to-5 jobs that they get time off, and we can, because the team needs to be a lot larger on the race weekends than during the week at the shop.
Yeah. How big is your crew on a race weekend?
With 2 cars, we have about 11 people.
I actually would have guessed more. If you said 30, I wouldn't have been surprised, honestly.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's reasonable. That's manageable.
And we want everybody to have a good time, and especially now, you're at a racetrack for 4 or 5 days with this crew. So you want everybody to have an enjoyable time. And, kind of going back a little bit to my drag racing days, by 2005 or so, when we were really into the drag racing, it wasn't necessarily hiring my buddies anymore. It was hiring the person that was best at that job.
Yeah.
And it became... corporate's not the right word, but it became a little bit less of a bonding experience and more of a job, and everybody had their specific roles. But you weren't all there necessarily because you had a bunch of fun together over the weekend.
Yeah.
It really started feeling like this Groundhog Day where we would show up, it'd be a quarter mile, we'd try to win and try to go fast and work on the same car over and over and over again, and then we'd pack everything up and then we'd do it again the next weekend. And that's what sounds like somebody. I'm talking like somebody that's got a bit burnt out. I think.
Listen. I've reviewed 1,000 cars. I know what it's like to be wanting to only be pushing upward, and sometimes it's everyday shit.
Yep. So now, kind of like on this next kind of version with all the drifting stuff, I try to keep it way more enjoyable and say, you know what, there might be this person that's the best person we could hire, but maybe they don't fit into the team format or the team kind of vibe, and we'll have somebody else on the team.
I mean, it doesn't seem to be hurting your standings. Frederick is doing quite well in the car. The car seems to work. I mean, there's not a whole lot to complain about at Papadakis Racing, is there?
There's more than one way to to build a race car, to win, to do a lot of things, and it's not just a math formula where there's a lot of different ways you can. It's not just a prime number, right?
I understand.
Yeah.
There's and finding ways that are unorthodox is a really good way to win. I mean, we had Steve Dinan on the show, and Steve Dinan talks about how he spends so much time not trying to add horsepower, but trying to reduce parasitic losses. And that ends up with an engine that is more powerful and more reliable. You know what I mean? And so it's just a different way of looking at things. And I like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way that I look at the competition team or the racing team nowadays. It's not just wins and trophies. It's actually having a good time at the track, and when fans come up giving some kind of experience that might be more than just watching the cars go around the track. Nowadays, it has so much to do with social media and the stuff that we put out there as far as our own how our own exposure, our own creativity, and if we're able to inspire people like I've been inspired all these years, then that's rewarding for me as much as a trophy.
Well. Yeah, and it's funny you brought that up, because inspiring others in a different way is interesting, because you're doing this Supra series, right, with the new B58 engine on your YouTube channel, which is doing well. That's your YouTube channel's like not that old, right?
No, I mean I haven't really put that much effort into it until the last 18 months or so.
Yeah, but the traffic on these videos is very good with your Supra videos. So I'm feeling this. What do you think about the Supra out of the box and its BMW-ness?
I would argue that the BMW-ness adds to the Supra versus taking it away. I think that there's feeling from Toyota loyalists, including myself, that want to see an OE come out and put a whole bunch of R&D into a car and make the best thing that they can make, right? It's their halo vehicle.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that those days have kind of gone away a bit for the major manufacturers, and maybe Honda was the last one to do with the NSX, but that didn't seem to go
Lexus, maybe.
Oh,
you know, there's a few cars where I drive them and I go, people are really doing their
Lexus,
best. But
I mean, they built a spaceship, but at the time, I think they had to build it twice, right? They built it out of aluminum first, and then by the time it was ready, it wasn't light enough, so they went back and built like one of the largest carbon fiber looms in the world. And there's only like 3 on the planet at the time. And then commercially, like it was praised, but didn't sell like out immediately. And now, of course, it's got this
instant
legend.
collectors, and they're all worth $1 million.
I could see why an OEM would look at that and go, "We're not doing that again."
well, if you want to build a car that you can sell for $60,000,
Yeah.
I think it's a different story than the LFA story.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with the Lexus. You know, they build these the LC 500s, but these are six-figure cars, right?
The LC 500 is the jam, though.
But that's twice as you can buy 2 Supras for one LC 500.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you get close.
And so that's the deal. Is that what I'm seeing is if you want a reasonably priced sports car that's a low volume, it seems like these partnerships are just happening more. They did it with the 86.
They're kind of inevitable, I think.
Look, man, I'm a racer, and I don't know about vehicle OE
this
development.
One's kind of egregious. It's a lot of BMW. And I drove it back to back on the racetrack with a BMW M2, and I was like, oh, dude, this is the same car. You know, but I will defend that the BMW Inline 6, and I've said it for years, is the new 2JZ because it can hold lots of power.
Yeah, so, you know, we work with Toyota, and we were looking at other options. We've been running a 4-cylinder engine for years in our Corollas.
What is that engine based on in the drift car?
Yep, it's called a 2ARFE engine. It's a 4-cylinder, 2.5 liter, also available in a 2.7 liter trim. From 2012 to like 2016, it came in RAV4, Camrys, the Scion TC,
Interesting.
a bunch of the different Toyota vehicles, and it was their larger displacement, all aluminum, 4-cylinder engine. And that's what we want. We said we want a lightweight 4-cylinder engine that's a big displacement, and then we build it with a different crankshaft, rods, pistons, valve train, turbocharge it, boost it to 30 pounds of boost, add 150 shot of nitrous, and then that's how we're able to make 1,000 horsepower out of the thing.
You use their block, though, still, which is amazing.
Yeah, block it ahead.
Because the Scion TC used to run, wasn't that like a NASCAR motor? I mean, like big V8.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first Scion TC we built for Tanner Foust had the NASCAR V8 in it. We ran that for a couple of years. And then when Tanner retired from drift, we brought on Frederick Aasbo. He was a really great rookie driver at the year, and we built him the second generation Scion TC. They had closed some loopholes.
No NASCAR engines?
Well, you could run the NASCAR engine, but you couldn't move. You couldn't mount the engine farther rearward than the factory firewall location. So this is where the front-wheel drive cars really have a handicap because, like the Scion TCs, they're what they call a cab forward design.
Right.
The driver and the windshield and all that stuff is moved forward to give more room for the occupants. That firewall is only 8 inches rearward of the front axle center line.
That is
8 inches.
Not much room. Wow.
So what happens is when you put a big heavy engine in it, most of it is hanging out in front of the front axle.
Yeah.
Well, when we were doing front wheel drive drag racing, that's advantageous. Good. But when you're rear wheel drive and you're drifting and you want some actual speed around the track, it's actually quite bad.
Yeah.
So what we did with the V8 one is there was a rule that said you must use the factory firewall. But you were allowed to hammer it out a little bit for an alternator intake manifold clearance. So what we did is we removed the factory firewall from the vehicle.
Yeah.
We hammered it out and shaped it so it was like formed and it had it moved much farther into the cockpit.
Yeah.
We reinstalled it into the car, and we basically were able to move the engine back, like 16 inches. Wow. And they didn't like that much, and they ended up closing the loophole by saying, F you and you're modifying the firewall.
Yeah.
You just doesn't matter what you do to the firewall, the engine can't be rearward of where the factory firewall location is.
Okay.
So that's how they. So when that rule changed, we said, okay, the engine is going to be mounted relatively far forward, so we need a relatively lightweight engine. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
4 cylinders.
Yep. So
Yeah.
4-banger.
But in general, is the rule change why? And am I making this up in my own head? It seems as if there was a big push to V8s, and now they're moving back to turbo engines in Formula Drift.
Yeah. So there's a couple of engines that are quite popular in the world, in motorsports or in drift. One of them is the Chevy LS. So LS1, LS3, LS7, all those. And at first they became really popular in drift because for a little amount of money, you can make about 500 or 600 horsepower.
Yeah.
The challenge is most of the cars are about 1,000 now. So to make 1,000 horsepower LS, it actually gets pretty complicated because you either need to run a bunch of nitrous on a fully built thing, or twin turbos, or a big single turbo, or supercharging. It just becomes this complicated V8, and it becomes expensive again. The other engine that's really popular is the Toyota 2JZ engine. Actually, a bit easier to make 1,000 horsepower, believe it or not, than the LS because inline 6, easy to work on, inexpensive. They came in a bunch of cars all over the world, so you can get a core engine for like $2,500, and with catalog parts and turbo manifolds and intake manifolds and things like that, you can make 1,000 horsepower for probably under $20,000, and that became now popular in drift.
And
how do you
just on a cost basis, not because someone said I prefer a turbo power band all of a sudden, or just because you're going to end up there eventually with a blown V8 or something anyway?
You would end up there eventually anyway. Some of the guys ran high RPM, really built like sprint car engines, and these V8s that were like sprint car engines, these are now $50,000 engines.
Well, Vaughn Gittin Jr. is running an Insano engine that he told me was like $100,000. Yeah, it's just batshit.
So there's an argument for that engine at the competitive level.
Yeah,
but for most racers that are not factory backed, that's not an option for them.
Yeah.
So a 2JZ is something that I can go on YouTube and kind of learn how to build, or maybe my buddies know how to do it, or the shop down the street, and I can buy all these different parts online or wherever and build it up. And there's not a lot of real secret stuff until you get to the 2,000 horsepower drag racing stuff. But if I want to make a 1,000 horsepower 2J, it's relatively straightforward.
Are there things about the 2J you don't like as a design goes?
I don't like the cast iron block, and it's relatively heavy. The cylinder head doesn't flow very well, so they usually require quite a bit of boost to make good power. But I mean, the valve train is very reliable. It's cammed directly over bucket. It limits the amount of the size of the cam that you can use, but it's very reliable valve train. The engines are very easily purchased from Japanese importers and such because they were used in other cars other than just Supras.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're a bit heavy and a bit antiquated, I think, as far as some of the technology.
It seems like for a little while the LS was popular just because it had torque down low and quick response, and you guys seem to have solved that, you and other teams as well, with like there's like
nitrous.
anti-lag and nitrous and like turbo lag doesn't seem to exist anymore.
Yeah, and the drivers are pretty good about driving around those things as well. But now you're turning into, it's not just you and your buddy going to the drift track. Now you've got an engine builder and a tuner and spare engines and all of these different things, because when you have all these variables that can go wrong, like nitrous and turbo and anti-lag, things sometimes go wrong, and you have to be able to have enough spare parts and people to work on it.
If you're this is a random question. If you're a factory-backed team, you're backed by Toyota, I imagine, in quite a few levels, and Rockstar, and there's big names on your shirt. Frederick goes out and engine just grenades. Not necessarily his fault. Something was wrong. Whatever. Boom. There's the engine. How fast can you get a new engine in that car? And who's footing the bill for that?
So that has happened more than once, because we are pushing that 2.7 liter engine really hard. About an hour to change the engine.
Pretty good.
Yeah, and we used to change engines regularly in the drag racing program because you're always pushing stuff to the limit. You find out what breaks, then you make that part stronger, then you move on, then you push it again, right? We kind of do that in the drifting world here as well, and because as the tires get better and there's more grip and we need to have more power to turn those higher grip tires, we need to continue to make more power. The we will replace engines sometimes, and we build the car and have enough spare so we can do that quickly. The cost on that is on the team. That's on us. So we don't want to we don't want to blow stuff up for many reasons.
Oh, it's on you guys.
Oh yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, I'll just give you a little 101 on just some motorsports teams. Typically will have the team itself, which is like an entity, and they'll bring in sponsors, and they have an obligation to go to the different events, and you try to be as competitive as you can for the budget that you have within the year. If you crash the car 6 times and blow up 6 engines, and the sponsors didn't sign up for that, so it's on the team, and that's what being a good team is understanding all of those aspects of just building a reliable car and building something that the driver can do a good job in, and reading within the rule books and seeing how competitive you can build something. All the logistics that come into a racing team, which is, you got all the guys you got to fly out and put up in hotels and transfer back and forth to the airport. So there's a lot to a team than just, tires on asphalt.
What do you think was the biggest unexpected cost of your racing team when you got there and you went, oh my God, I have this too? What was the big oh shit moment there?
Travel is probably the largest item for a team. Yeah. You're transporting these cars across country a couple times a year in a truck with a trailer. You need a driver for that. Where's that driver going to sleep every night while he's going across country? You're flying a bunch of people in. Everybody's got to stay in a hotel and then feed everybody. It's actually more than the actual vehicle itself.
It's like TV, same as TV. It's the same shit. It's just the when you add up what it costs to bring 10 people or 12 people anywhere, it's scary as hell.
The cameras are less expensive than the people, right? Yeah. And you know what? And I didn't even touch on the paying of the people, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you take care of your people and you want to bring in quality people for whatever production you're doing.
Yeah. I want to get to some questions from the audience, and I'm sorry I meant to say to the top of the show that we have a lot of super chat questions, and I only want to take the ones that are actually pertinent to what Stefan does. So if there's like just general car advice questions, we're going to screenshot them, and when Zach and I do our next solo show, I will get to them because I appreciate everybody's donations. But when we have important people in studio, I do want to focus on just the questions that pertain to their area of expertise, and if we have time at the end, maybe we'll get to some more. So, yes, red Lamborghinis are exactly what you need in your life, Stefan.
I feel like this is an early model with carburetor. Oh, they all had carburetors, right?
No, mine's injected.
Is it?
Mine's that one. You can tell. You could tell how the engine cover goes. The engine cover is very flat in the carbureted models, and in the injected ones, it's got 2 humps on the outside.
So I saw one of these drivetrains over at a Tillich shop, Fast Cars, all out, and
it's huge, isn't it? It's enormous,
dude. Engine. It's gnarly. It's the whole drivetrain and everything, and what was astounding to me was it looked like what's in like an Audi or something, right? But it's backwards.
Yeah, it is.
Right? The engine's
in back. The gearbox goes forward from the engine.
It goes both ways because it also goes rearward into the oil pan.
Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does go both ways. Yeah. It's a crazy ass car. And what's crazy is to do an engine out, you got to take the engine out of the top and the gearbox, which sucks.
GTO Wait, do you take the body off of the frame?
No.
It comes out of like the hatch there?
Yeah, you take the rear bumper off and you take the engine cover off and it comes out the top.
Have you had any big service on yours?
I bought mine in the middle of a major service that they'd finished as part of my purchase deal, and I have driven it 6,000 kilometers in a year, and it has cost me $0.
Oh, wow.
It works absolutely flawlessly, and it has paid for itself. Like, it hasn't paid for itself, but I've had it on 2 static photo shoots, which will pay for another major service if I need one. I'm fucking so stoked on that car, dude. I talk about it all the time. I talk about it way too much, but I drive the shit out of it, and it rules, and it works, and wherever you go with it, you win.
You're the only one with that story for a Countach.
Yeah. Bought the right car, and I drive it. Driving it keeps it very happy.
I have a buddy, James Chen, who's got a James got a
yeah,
white one
the
too.
white one. He's got the pearl white, which is
what color is yours?
Mine is that color. Mine's
yours
red,
red.
with,
Okay,
red with gold
That's right.
wheels.
Okay.
Yeah. What do we got from the audience, Zach?
We can't zoom in. So the first one is
Can we no longer zoom in on this fucking thing?
it'll blow up the entire thing, which we could do. Joe Leonard asked, what are the best first jobs or internships if you want to be on the path to work at a shop like yours?
I think I don't know if he asked this before Stefan started with build a car and race it, but if someone showed up off the street and said, I'll do anything, what's the best way in?
So my story is out of high school. I started visiting and spending as much time at the place that built race engines, and I literally started just sweeping the floor for free. I was like, I'm going to stand in the corner, and when something falls, I'm going to pick it up. And then eventually I was like, I'm bored. I'm going to wash the doors. It was like, imagine an old machine shop or something like that. So I took a rag and stuff and started washing the doors. And I just started learning the language and learning the guys, and they started trusting, like, oh, this kid, we could have him do a little bit more. And eventually, and so that's what I would suggest is find somebody that does something you can learn from, and without bothering them, try to spend as much time helping them as possible for free. And my argument is that so many people spend so much money to learn how to do something. I don't think there's enough people that, my theory was I'm going to do something for free to learn.
It's very hard to just start. That's very hard for people. It's a lot easier, I think, for people to say, I'm going to enroll in this thing and someone will teach me. There's a lot of people who email me and say, how do I do what you do? And the answer is so simple that nobody likes it. Get cameras, make videos with them. That's literally, is your video, but my video is going to suck. Oh, yeah, it's going to suck. And not only that, it's going to suck for a long time. It may never be good, but that's the thing you do is you just go.
You're going to go to school, and you're going to build a video in school, and your video is going to suck.
You'll pay someone to,
And you're going to pay somebody to tell you that it sucks?
Yes.
Instead of just putting it on the web, and for free, people are going to tell you your stuff sucks.
Even if it's good, they'll tell you it sucks. Yeah.
So that's the same thing I think with, and that's, maybe, I guess we're getting to something maybe at the core of my personality is it's a bit of the ready, fire, aim.
Yeah,
and
just go. It's perfect. Just go is a perfect metaphor for you.
So the short answer to the question is intern.
Yeah.
Anywhere for free.
Yeah.
And what was the other question? How do I intern?
No, I mean, that was pretty much
that's it. Just do it.
We have another
somewhere.
question that says, what was the hardest part of the recent Supra engine rebuild? What's the status of that engine? Is that a done and running engine right now?
Yeah, sitting on the stand at our shop right now, waiting for what we're going to do with it.
And is it going to go into Frederick's car?
We have not decided yet.
Oh, you haven't decided?
So
okay,
yeah, we're
cool.
trying to figure that out. It's barely December right now.
Do you have a Supra sitting around with no engine in it?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, the car that engine came out of is sitting at our shop.
So they didn't just send you a crate motor. You took it out of a car.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, if you wanted an engine, you needed a whole car.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you're tight with Toyota, maybe they can get you an engine or whatever. But I guess not.
Your takedown video, which millions of people watch, but I watched it as well, and it helped me understand variable intake lift, like how that mechanism works, better than any of the animation videos that I've found. Just because you were showing the actual part, but it's completely taken apart, and you just did a really good job of that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This person also said, where do you see electrification taking racing in the future, if anywhere?
So I think there's another big challenge that electric vehicles have in racing is they're not very exciting to watch because they don't sound cool and they don't have that. They're missing one of the senses. So I think that there's going to be a development end of it, and you're seeing that with Formula E, right? A lot of manufacturers want to get in there because of the technical challenges and what they're going to learn on that end. But unless they come out with something that I don't know of, there isn't something that interests me to go to the racetrack and watch an electric car.
I'm with you. I agree. I want that iPace they're running before Formula E. It's brutal to watch, man. It's really, really terrible.
The whole series. I mean, I watched the Formula E out here in Long Beach. I think it was like 3 years ago when they ran the same weekend as the Indy cars, and it was gimmicky. Yeah. It was interesting to see, and it was kind of cool because they were on radial, so they were sliding around a little bit more than the racing tire cars. Yeah. But after like 4 or 5 laps, I was like, okay, it's not that exciting anymore.
Here's how I'll get into EV racing. Robbie Gordon Stadium Super Trucks EV. Send shit flying through the air.
That would help.
If it's not going to be loud, let's see cars turning into airplanes.
Would definitely help.
But if you do that and they sound cool,
That's even
Yeah,
better. I know.
it really is.
It's hard. It's hard to be a fan of an electric motorsport. It is. It makes where I like it. I like it at Pikes Peak. Hill climb cars make a lot of sense as EVs. That blast of power for like 5 minutes and then you're done. That's perfect for an EV.
yeah. Last time I saw, there weren't many spectators on Pikes Peak. And if there are,
not.
it's actually
It's a YouTube sport, Stefan.
Yeah, you know what? I've been to Pikes Peak once, and I think what was really exciting wasn't that it was the variety of vehicles that were going up there, and that's part of what I think is interesting about motorsports is the variety of engines that are in a lot of motorsports, like especially drift. Once they're all so similar, I'm not interested in spec classes like Indy cars and stuff like that are not interesting to me because there's two engines in one chassis and a bunch of drivers that I don't care about. So not that it's not exciting and but for
you don't
myself,
have a team. Yeah, you don't have someone to root for. You know, you can't relate to any of it. You know, I think what could be cool with an EV is an EV entrant in like a rally cross event. A rally cross EV, I think, could be very, very cool.
This is where I think EV works, is if it's one of the formulas in a racing series.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of the old IndyCar setup for the 500 where they had all these obscure builds and all these different engines. Well, I think it'd be interesting if there was an EV car that came out to Indy. And it doesn't have to. I don't want a whole field of them, but maybe there's a couple of them, and maybe they're not as fast.
Car
I don't know.
we're at it.
Let's see. But I think that's what's interesting is you've got a turbine car and you've got an electric car and you've got like the piston car and the turbo car, and they're all kind of going different speeds. And will it make the full 500 miles? I don't know. So I feel
that's
like
what's fun about
variety.
like FD is the tire size is determined by like the weight of the vehicle, right? So it's kind of cool that you can still have these different combinations. Like, well, they're running a heavier car, but they want more tire. So if you were, to use yours like the Indy 500, like, oh, maybe these guys use a turbine car that goes 400 miles an hour, but it turns like crap. So then you have to find ways to even it out because otherwise someone will just find what's the best solution and run that one. But if you make the rules like allowed to be competitive with the different setups, it's really cool.
Yep, and I think that works for a few years, and then everybody figures out the one setup, and then everybody goes
Everyone
that way,
runs the
and then it's less
Change them
exciting.
again.
Yeah.
Santiago says, since drift cars have to run at red line for several seconds, do you build these engines differently than drag engines? I think that's worded basically, but I think you understand the question. How do you build a drift engine for the task of very high RPM at the lower range of speed and possibly being shoved with a face full of tire smoke during its entire run?
So I know what he's asking, and traditionally in motorsport, drag racing, you're looking for a power band, a relatively flat torque curve in the engine. I'm a little technical here, and you want the horsepower to continue to increase as the RPMs increase. So if you ever been into like a racing, like an M car or something like a high RPM naturally aspirated car, as you get on the throttle and as the RPM continues to increase, the horsepower continues to increase all the way up to red line, and then you'll shift and you get another surge of that power as the RPM goes up. We don't actually want that kind of power band in drift because the car is spending so much time near red line. And if there ends up being a little bit of extra grip and wants to pull the engine RPM down, it's going to fall to a lower RPM where there's actually less power, and it makes it easier for the tire to grip up, and actually it's harder for the engine to keep the tire spinning.
So it's more like a rally car where you want a torque build?
Yeah, you do. You want the torque to peak out early and actually drop off. So the horsepower, let's say you have an engine RPM of 8,000, which is your rev limiter. We want the engine peak horsepower to be about 6,800 or 7,000 RPM and then fall off as it gets to 8,000 RPM, because as the driver's full throttle going around the track, he'll bring it up to its normal. It'll come up to, let's say, 7,200, 7,500 RPM. And because the horsepower drops off before the rev limiter, it'll tend to hold at like that 7,600, 7,700, not just sit on the rev limit.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then
so it's sort of a self-regulating mechanism, just that's inherent in these types of engines to keep it off the rev limiter.
Yep. And then as like it maybe grips up a little bit and the RPMs get dragged down, there's actually more power down
more
there.
Power, and then it starts to slip up again. So is that what it is? So
yeah.
like it'll
So
sit like slip grip.
Yep.
Wow.
And we can actually adjust that on the turbo cars with having nitrous come up to, let's say, 7,500 RPM and then shut off before it hits the limiter.
Oh, so you intentionally drag it down a little bit there.
And if it drags down, the nitrous can reactivate. Or maybe we have the boost come up to 30 PSI, but after 7,000 RPM, we can have the boost start dropping off a little bit so it doesn't want to go up and hit the rev limiter. So there's a couple things that we've worked on over the years. Number one is making more power every year. But once we got to the power that we wanted, which was about 1,000, we wanted to make another 1,000 RPM of revs. So we were only revving the engine to about 8,000, 8,200. But when you make all that power, now the thing wants to sit on the limiter more. So we've tried to get it up to 9,000 RPM, 9,200, where the power will drop off. And then now the driver has power from 3,500 RPM all the way up to 9,000 and has a very broad power band and makes it much easier for the driver to improvise.
Yeah.
And it becomes more forgiving of a car and more competitive as well.
Wow, that's so fucking
Wow.
cool, man. That's
I just
awesome.
shook my head a lot. The audience
That's
can't see
awesome.
it, but that is brilliant stuff.
Cho Ray says, Stefan, you've always been it says the shot. I think it's supposed to be shit. How bad did the market crash of 2008 hurt your business?
So yeah, there were some, what do they call it? Adjustments?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately, we're a relatively small team. The sponsorship amounts did go down a little bit, but we are pretty lean, and we were able to just, we made some cutbacks a little bit, and we all make a little bit less money, but we're able to continue to do what we love. And you just kind of push through.
Do you do any customer racing, or do you only have factory-backed racing efforts right now?
We only work with we do two cars.
That's it.
We do Frederick Aasbo, which is in the Toyota Corolla hatchback, which works with Toyota, which we work with Toyota, and Jonathan Castro, who's out of Dominican Republic. He has his own sponsors and everything, but we handle all the logistics and building of the car and maintenance and everything for him.
What does he drive? I'm not familiar with Jonathan Castro.
He has a Toyota Corolla, a Toyota 86.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's
a
nice.
GT86.
There you go. Nice looking car.
Yeah.
What's the engine setup in that car?
He uses the same 2AR engine that we run in
really?
the So he's the other 4-cylinder in Formula Drift right now.
So it's an inline 4. Oh, neat.
Yeah.
How does that car drive? Is
that
thing
one's
awesome?
a really good car.
That thing's got to be
It's a really
rad.
good car. So
yeah.
the deal is that the GT86s come with the Subaru the flat 4.
Yeah.
Which for its sort of build, it's good, but if you're trying to make 800 or 1,000 horsepower for drift,
No way.
So we took out that Boxer flat 4 and put in an inline 4, and it's a great car. I think a little bit higher center of gravity than what it is factory.
Yeah, but if you have a plus 500, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, all right. Jason says, Steph, give us some thoughts on BMW Valvetronic. Engines that use it, he says, have potentially limitless cam lift, but there's zero aftermarket control for it. Is that accurate?
Yep. So my understanding is that he's correct. It's called the Valvetronic. So there's two different systems in the cylinder head that adjust. There's the Vanos, which adjusts the cam timing, which is a cam gear that adjusts the cam position relative to the crankshaft. And there's the Valvetronic, which changes the lift of the intake cam. And basically what happens is the camshaft turns, and instead of it pushing directly on the valve, it goes through a series of rocker arms that can adjust the amount that cam opens the valve. The challenge is that you have to really understand the cam profiles and the rocker arm design to put a larger camshaft into it. That's beyond what we do as a team. So unlike the B58 engine that we're using in the Supra, it has that technology, and we've only used the factory camshaft and rocker arm. So we're limited on what the factory designed, which has to meet emissions and low RPM torque. So we would like to run a larger camshaft, and I think it is good technology, but we're limited with the aftermarket, and that's a lot of the challenge nowadays. Is the cars are so technically advanced that they take teams of engineers that specialize in that one system of that engine, And for the aftermarket, if you're dealing with, XYZ cam company, they're limited and they don't always have the resources to build these exotic racing parts for these modern engines. And if they did, it might be a smaller, not that many people are looking to buy that stuff.
I have a really good relationship with the guys at Mountune who do the Ford stuff, and they build a lot of engines for Ford factory race cars and for customer racing, and they do pretty much all the Focus RS tuning. I mean, I don't really know anyone else who's doing Focus RS tuning here in California. I'm sure somebody is, but I don't know. And they the Focus RS, as I learned, because I had one and I fucking hated it, but they did a lot of work on it. It's really, really complicated. Like between how the turbo works and how that diff works and how all this different stuff is going on, and they get a lot of fucked up cars that come in there, and they have to fix a lot of bad tunes that cause real damage in their cars. They had a stack of crate engines for the RS, probably 25 crate engines. It was like 30 feet high on the whole wall of them. He goes, see these? We just take them off the rack. Either you bring in cars that are blown up, bad tunes, take them one off the rack, throw it in. It was crazy. See, and it was like, people just do not understand how complicated this engine is, how much damage you can cause.
Yeah, and the different cars respond differently to the tune, right? Or to being tuned. You talked about the Subarus back in the days when they came out with the WRX. I think that was a car that a lot of people thought had a huge amount of potential, but most of the guys that turned the boost up broke the rings on the pistons right away.
Man, manual boost controller, just build it at Home Depot, and then
those cars
the next day.
They have a pretty low ceiling.
Yeah, and then so like the 2020 Supra, has a pretty responds quite well to tuning, especially, and there's guys making over 600 horsepower with mild tuning setups on them.
Do you think that car, like if a customer, a regular person with a Supra wants just a little more go on their street car, and you do your intake, exhaust, intercooler, and your tune, do you think that based on what you've seen that motor's robust enough that if you do what you'd call the full bolt-on treatment, that you could run it as hard as if it was stock and not have to worry about smoking it or breaking it?
I don't think you could run it as hard as stock. I think that they designed these cars to where it's 110 degrees in the desert and it can go full boost for 20 minutes. And I think the duty cycle is lower as you start modifying the car more. Yeah. And if you're going to take your 335 horsepower car and make 550 horsepower out of it, you should expect you might want to take it a little easier than maybe what the factory. Yeah. But look, if these are street cars and even race cars, I think that with enough development, maybe you could. But if you're just going to go and flow, I'm just telling people, like, if you're going to go and flash your computer and turn the horsepower up 100, you may want to consider that you're outside the parameters of where the factory designed it. And if you're driving to Vegas and it's 100 degrees outside and you're trying to do 200 miles an hour for 20 minutes,
you may
aside from the legal problems there,
you may want to watch your gauges a little more closely.
Exactly. But I think if you get a factory car, you might not be able to break it trying to.
I agree. I think there's something really to be said if you want to go. If you're going to be the kind of person who's going to beat the shit out of the car, there's a good argument to leave it alone.
I'm all for modifying it. Don't get me wrong, dude. I say modify it and go out and have fun with it. And all of us that are doing it for the street, you can only experience that power for moments because you're blazing through any kind of speed laws and all that stuff. I can't imagine even the stock cars, if you're on the full throttle for more than 10 seconds.
No, but people go to track days. You got guys that they'll build up their street car a little bit. They'll go to Buttonwillow. They'll go run streets and stuff, and it'll be hot out there. And
I think that then if you're then you may want to do a tune and some cooling system stuff, and you need to think of it holistically, and then it works. So that's why the guys put the racing tires on there, and then they go to the track, and all of a sudden their brakes are burning up. It's like, well,
hang on a minute.
So and then you put pads on there, and you're not my brake fluid's boiling. Okay, maybe you need some brake fluid, and you put that on there, and then
keep kicking that ball down there.
but that's what's fun, right? You want to make the car have more power, have a quicker lap time, and you figure out how to do it, and you talk to your buddies, and you have some experience, and you read the forums and stuff, and you find out what guys are doing to do that successfully.
Yeah. James says, are forged engines and billet block technology viable for street use? What is the service life of a high-powered 2JZ or an RB? And then he wants to know what's your favorite brand of oil and filters.
Yep. So
I'll take the third part last, Bob.
So that is okay. So oil and filters is easy. We use Lucas oil in all of our stuff. We're using a 5W50 synthetic.
Okay.
And we use that in all the racing cars. And then filters, we use the OE filters.
Oh.
When we use something that's external, we've used the K&Ns.
Okay.
Yep. And then as far as the billet stuff, that is a good question that I don't know the answer, that I'd also like to know the answer.
Really?
Yeah, we haven't worked with any of the billet block stuff.
Even with your huge powers, you just don't even bother? You just use regular blocks?
We run such unique engines that like we don't run the 2Js. So maybe if we ran 2Js, but even then, we're not making 2,000 horsepower in drift, and I think that's kind of 1,500 horsepower, 2,000 is when they start going to this billet stuff. So I don't actually have any experience with the billet blocks, but I always wondered, it seems like they make two different versions, one with water that flows through it and then some that don't. But
would the one that don't be like a pro stock, like psycho death drag car that doesn't even have like a cooling system?
Yes.
That always bugged me out when I found out drag cars like sometimes don't even have cooling systems because they only run for like 9 seconds.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
If it does drag racing, man, if you don't need it, why are you taking it with you down the drag strip?
Just wait,
That's
right?
fucking
Just drag and
crazy,
wait.
dude. Other than your, do we have anything else?
Someone asked if you remember an orange 2-stroke Ruckus you built. That was the last question for you specifically.
Yeah, so a bunch of buddies and I got into still a bit of a scene, like the scooter scene.
Bro, can I go join your scooter club? I have a Yamaha 125. Let's go.
I was like, yeah.
I'm about to upgrade to a Vespa 300 too, because I want to go 110 miles an hour on my scooter. Vespa 300 will go 110 miles an hour.
Have fun with that.
I don't actually want to do that, but I do want to ride on the highway.
Yeah, it was fun. You know, we just we all love modifying stuff, and then we got into the scooter scene where instead of the 50cc engine, we put the 125cc engine into it, extend the swing arm, different wheels, tires, handlebars, paint, like the whole deal.
Hell
so,
yeah. You still have it?
No, I sold that years ago and then bought a full-size motorcycle.
Oh. What do you ride?
I don't ride anymore, but I had this was maybe 8 years ago, a Ducati Monster 696.
Oh, yeah.
Was that the
nice little bike?
Yeah.
Good
That's
bike.
fun.
I always loved the Monster. I'm too big to ride it though. It's for it's for smaller people.
That fits me fine.
Yeah. No, I got a SV 650, which is the slightly bigger version and less Italian version of the same kind of thing.
So I'll tell you a story. When I was 15 years old, I tried to talk my mom into letting me buy a YSR. And the YSR is the little street bike, but it's like mini. And I was like, I think maybe it was even 14, but 15, I was like, look, at 15 years old, I can go out and I get a learner's permit to ride a motorcycle. I just can't go on the freeway or go at night. But I can ride around the streets and stuff on this motor. She's just like, no, you're not getting a motorcycle. And for years, I wanted a full-size motorcycle. Finally, when I got one, I was so busy riding defensively that I couldn't enjoy riding
you
the
were like
bike.
too scared?
Yeah.
You're just not too scared, but just like thinking about all the danger lurking around you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I didn't have enough years of riding motorcycles to just go in the canyons and just have fun riding it.
Yeah.
It was, all right, now counter steer a little bit, lay it over. Okay, look where I want to go. Keep your eyes up. Okay, shift. Am I in the right gear? Like all these different things versus just kind of flowing through and having fun. And I realized that I'm a car guy, not a motorcycle guy.
I feel you. I definitely feel you. I love my scooter for beating traffic as a practical tool and parking up front and the predictability of getting around town. When I go fast, I want that cage around me. I want some body work and a seatbelt.
Yeah.
Do. Yeah.
Well, I have a question. What would be like 5 tips or 3 nuggets of knowledge for someone who might be afraid to open up their engine for the first time?
Yep. So number 1, do it on a car or an engine with low to zero consequence. So don't take your daily driver and do it. Buy
a cheap car.
Go buy the cheapest running WRX or old something that there's a bunch of information on the web for. Don't get something that
Get a Fox body. Start with a Fox
a
body.
Fox body's great. But those might be a little bit expensive for something that runs because they're getting a little bit more valuable,
True.
right?
Yeah.
So
you can get a really terrible it doesn't have to be a V8.
So I would argue you want
Fox body.
Number one, I would get an inexpensive second car. That inexpensive second car would be something that you're fine if it doesn't run much often. And number two, it has to have a huge following on the web that you can watch people doing tutorials on YouTube and forums and start getting into some of those clubs, and so you can have people to ask questions. The next would be take it apart and start working on it. Get the service manual as well, the factory service manual.
Yeah.
I learned so much about working on engines from just reading the service manual and following the steps and the procedures and the measuring. And the next is buy good tools. If you're interested in cars and you're interested in mechanics, buy the right tool once, because I've got tools. I'm 42. I've got tools from when I was 19, 20 years old. So over 20-year-old tools, because I bought those good tools at first. The cheap tools that I got back then, I bought again
4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to. But the next thing is, but I can't afford all of the tools that I need. So what I would do is I'd buy the tools that I needed. So I would go,
you need them for individual
I need a
jobs.
10, I need a 12, I need a 14, I need a 17 wrench. I'm going to get those of high quality. I'm not going to get the whole set of cheap Craftsman stuff with all of the 12-point stuff that you never use. You want 6-point sockets, and anyways, get the tools that you need.
That is fantastic advice, because I worked on my car like last year, and I had some tools, but I had to buy like a bunch more stuff. So like you said I shouldn't do, I went and bought like
the
big set, because like, well, now I'm covered for a while, but I have all the standard wrenches I bought don't work because my car is all metric.
Yep, and that's why you want something. You want a car of low consequence.
Yep. Yeah.
You want a car of low consequence that it doesn't need to run all the time, because if you need to go on eBay or find the Snap-on truck or your buddy that you could borrow something from, and you get stuck somewhere, you're like, oh, I guess I'm done tonight.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get this tool or this part, and then I'm going to work on it next time. Or maybe I'm going to work on a different part of the car, a different part of the engine, while I wait for that part to get shipped in, or borrow it or whatever.
Just go. Just do it.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Stefan. Good show. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, anytime.
Steph Papadakis on Instagram, and Papadakis, Steph Papadakis. Go check out his 1,000 horsepower Supra build series. Go watch a Formula D race this season, either virtually or in person. I recommend in person. If you can get to the track to go watch some Formula D, it's one of the best spectator sports in motorsport. You can, they do a really good job with like bleachers and stuff. You can see the whole track usually. The drivers and the pits are extremely accessible. You can walk up to your favorite driver and say hello. I imagine you could probably walk right up to Stefan and say hello if he's in the paddock. And you want to plug anything else before we get out of here?
No, thanks for having me on, and get out there and fire. Like, whatever project you have, just start working on it. Unless it's the wife's car and she needs to get to work.
Thanks very much, everybody. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on the Joe Rogan Experience at 3 o'clock, which is very exciting. First time this year. Let's see, Wednesday at 5, we're back in studio with automotive journalist Derek Powell. And we are going to get to those questions of yours as well that we didn't finish today. I appreciate your enthusiasm. Thursday at 5, Tony Quiroga is in studio from Car and Driver. And he's going to be, what is he talking about? Are we talking about a thing, Zach, or just he's hanging out?
They did their big performance car test.
Oh, is it Lightning Lap?
Yeah, Lightning
They're
Lap.
talking about Lightning Lap. Perfect. All right. Well, for now, the Smoking Tire Podcast is powered by Shout Engine. Get your own damn podcast at shoutengine.com. It's easy. All you need is a microphone, a connection to the internet, and ideally something to say. Good night, everybody.